Hey guys, once again, it is Hugo Strange here with another episode of The Strange Show. This time a little self-serving because I've been meaning to do this for a while now. For those of you who watch my videos, you should know that not too long ago I purchased the latest, I suppose you could call it a J.J. Abrams, but really Doug Dorst is the guy who wrote this novel, S. And I did an unboxing video of it. I think my second unboxing video. And yeah, I have the book here. And after that, I read it, and I did not enjoy it. And you can see on Amazon this thing is getting rave reviews, and I've written a review on Amazon myself. And there are some people, very few people, who didn't like the book, and they all have varying reasons. I think mine is probably the most rational, if I can say that. But
How many
I don't
stars
know.
did you give it?
I think I gave it 3,
Okay.
just
So
for
you're not a hater.
no. I really liked all the ideas going into this book, but the execution left quite a bit to be desired.
Are you
And
sorry that you read it?
yes, but I appreciate the experience. And I think that's the more important thing to this book than the actual story.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, the experience certainly made it better, but the actual book itself, the story I did not find good. Anyway, I guess now would be a perfect time to introduce my guest here, who's one of the more mainstream voices about this book. This is J.R. Forsteros. Did I get that right?
Forasteros, very close.
Forsteros.
Yeah.
That's going to take some time.
No worries.
Forsteros.
It took me some time too.
Awesome. Awesome. So you fully enjoyed this book. So I want to ask you right off the bat, what was your initial exposure to the book? What did you see the trailer? What was that like?
Yeah. So I'm a blogger, and one of the things I focus on a lot is book reviews. So it's gotten to the point where I have some pretty faithful readers who will often suggest books to me and say, hey, are you thinking about this book? Is this one you're going to ever cover? Have you read this? Whatever. So I had a couple of those people that I really enjoy say, "Whoa, OMG, did you hear about the J.J. Abrams book?" And I love J.J. Abrams, right?
Okay.
So I thought, wow, no, I actually haven't heard about this book, and anything Abrams does, I know is at least going to be unusual.
Okay.
So then I did some research, saw the book trailer, and I believe that by the time I had heard about it, it had been out for like a week or so. And so
Wow.
now I tried to avoid any spoilery reviews. I
Mm.
saw the basic concept of the novel, that it's basically trying to explode the genre of novel altogether and do something like really innovative and different. And then I basically stopped there. I was like, okay, that's all I need to know. You had me at Abrams, so I got on Amazon, got a copy of it. I think I got one of the last copies they had in stock because I had a couple of friends who jumped on it. A couple days later and were able to get one. And so, it came in the mail a few days later, and I stopped whatever I was reading and dove right into it. So,
Wow. So we're both J.J. Abrams fans here, and we both have a really high enjoyment of literature. I've been on a massive Stephen King kick for I think 2 years now.
nice.
Just burning through like most of his master works because they said The Dark Tower was going to be made into a movie, and of course J.J. Abrams was attached to that for a little bit. And I was like, well, I got to finish the book before I actually see
Of
the movie
course,
because
of
everybody was
course.
like, Dark Tower's it. So yeah. So coming off the heels of King, and I did a lot of audiobooks because
Okay.
I'm a
Yep.
multitasker.
Sure, of course.
So when this book was coming out, and everybody was saying, this can't be done in an audiobook. You actually have to read the physical thing, and I agree with that completely. I was like, okay, well, this could be a great time for me to actually have like a physical book, because oftentimes, when I'm at work and I have some time to spare, I would like to be able to pull out a book and just start reading. And I said, well, why not read this new book that's coming out? It seems interesting. The thing that got me was that it didn't really tell you the exact plot of the book. And
The
here's
marketing or what?
the marketing, and as far as like the dust jacket, because the dust
Oh,
jacket kind of
absolutely.
tells
Yeah.
you what's going on inside the book, but it doesn't actually give you the plot as to what the book's about. What is the core issue in the book? And that
Well, now, so when you say the book, what are you referring to? Are you
ah
referring to the ship
ah
of
good
Theseus
good
or to
question. Okay.
S?
Okay, yes. This is how I differentiate, and I don't know if you do, but for the sake of this conversation, this is what I use when I refer
Okay.
to the book
Okay.
and so on and so forth. So the ship of Theseus is the ship of Theseus, the actual story, the ship of Theseus. The book S is all the stuff going on in the margins.
Okay.
That's how I distinguish the two. So when I
Okay.
talk about when I say the book, I mean as a whole, like the whole thing.
The whole work. Okay.
Yes, the whole work. So I'll
Okay.
say S for the margin world and Ship of Theseus for Ship of Theseus.
Well,
Um,
and I think you also have to count in the third layer, which is the relationship of the editor to the ship of Theseus.
yeah, that's something that we can definitely get into
Okay.
later on, but
Okay.
I'll grant you that. Yes. So did you when you started reading S, did you go through any kind of instructions on how to read it? Because I know there's a poster on Amazon who has like a kind of reading instructions on how to read this book. So did
No,
you do that?
and no, and in fact, like I remember very clearly sitting down with the book, taking the plastic off, pulling it out of the dust jacket, and being hooked from that very moment. Because when you hold Ship of Theseus in your hands, it feels like an old library book. And I kind of
Yes, it
opened
does.
it, noticed that there was I hadn't even gotten to the point where I knew that stuff was crammed into the book. So you open it, all these artifacts start popping out, and you're like, what? And one in the world, you can immediately see the margin notes. The little decoder wheel in the back, and it's obviously like a book that was in a library, like all of it. So even just the presentation, I was like, oh man, this is something really special.
Yeah.
I've never had this kind of experience before, and so I just dove right in. I opened up to the first page, and you've immediately got Eric's original notes about if you find this, return it here, and you've got all these back and forth notes, and so I just kind of dove in and took it page by page, and I kind of developed my own rhythm. I know some people like read a whole page and then go do the margin notes. Some people read like 4 pages and then go back, and I don't know that I ever settled on a rhythm, but it was one I developed on my own. I really intentionally try to stay away from what the internet was saying about this book.
That's fair. That's fair.
So,
That's
what about
very
you?
brave of you. Me, I actually went through the guy on Amazon and I said, because I had the same reaction. I'm pretty sure everybody did when they first cracked open it. But how the heck do I read this thing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean,
And
it's intimidating.
yeah, it was pretty intense. And I found myself just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna read Ship of Thieves. I'm gonna read a chapter and then go back and then read the margin notes. And that's how I did
That's
it. And
fascinating.
I read the margin notes based on the timeline provided from the guy in Amazon, um, which I think was fair because then I could kind of read the book, go back to the beginning and read through the margin notes again. And it was definitely time consuming, but I muscled my way through it. Um, so that's cool that you kind of stayed away from all the publicity. So we're kind of on different planes here as far as
Now,
our
yeah. So,
exposure to
so
the
how long ago did you read S?
I believe November. I
Okay, so it's still
think,
been a while ago.
yeah, I think November is when I finished it.
Yeah. So we're
And
probably pretty close to the same time. Then. Same time frame.
awesome, awesome. And yeah, so I looked through all the ancillary materials, the stuff in the book, and read some of those, and it was just like, okay, wow, this is a lot of material here. Um, but anyway, so here's where we get into a lot of the issues that I had with it, and maybe you can course correct me on that, or
Or
just
you can
share
course
your own
correct
insights on
me.
that. There will be plenty of course correcting. So yeah. Um, Now with the actual plot of the book of S,
Yes.
the actual plot of that was not something that I was originally interested in. If I would have known that's what the book was about, I wouldn't have bought it. It
Now
just wouldn't
tell me
be.
what you think the plot of S is.
Well, as far as the central thing that's going on in there is Eric and Jen basically trying to figure out who VM Straka was
Mm-hmm.
before Eric's professor can purchase research that was supposedly stolen from Eric. Um, I do believe that's it. But there are some other things going on there that I don't think I actually quite grasped as far
Like all
as,
the conspiracy stuff?
yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the thing is, none of that seemed to be important or had any stakes attached to it. Meaning, the thing with going on with Eric is, okay, I understand he's trying to get this research out before his professor does. Okay, I understand that. But what I didn't grasp from the story is why was VM Straka so important? What did he do that caused him to either be killed by, I think, Bouchard?
Uh-huh. Well,
Is
yeah,
the
maybe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand why figuring out who VM Straka is so important. I don't see what that would do for the characters. I didn't see anything aside from like their own gratification of like, yes, we figured this out, but it's like, what would that do for you? That
Uh-huh.
that's the kind of thing I didn't see, and
Okay.
as the book went on, it just became more and more of this. Well, was it Summersby? Was it Garcia or Ferreira or the other
Yeah,
person that kept?
all the big list of guys, yeah.
Yeah, and it just didn't. I didn't see any stakes in knowing that information. I didn't quite grasp why that information was important. And then they started saying that, oh, well, maybe they were in this group called the S. And I'm like, what? So what was your assessment of that? Cause maybe, again, maybe I missed something. Maybe, so tell me, what did you get out of that?
I guess for me, and I spent a good amount of time in the academic world. I'm a pastor, and I spent some time in the biblical academy, and so there's all kinds of little mysteries like that, even in the world of the Bible. Like for instance, who wrote the book of Hebrews, right? No one
Mm,
knows. Everyone's got a pet theory. Who is the beloved disciple in the Gospel of John? Same kind of a thing. And I mean, maybe you wouldn't be. Some people are quite surprised how vitriolic those debates can get, particularly when there's literally, until we invent time travel, there's literally no way to know. Like it is a totally unanswerable question, and yet people still get so attached to their ideas and so worked up, and people are still writing dissertations and books and all that kind of stuff about that. So I guess for me, the whole idea that there would be this character who was alive and writing in the early 20th century, who was a part of the sort of the socialist movement that took over Russia, that was influencing like some of the countries in Europe, um, and then that this person would become the center of some kind of a literary mystery that would consume a bunch of academics, but that no one else in the world would really care about. That was fairly believable. I was like, yeah, I've lived in that, and I guess it was enough for me to know the kind of person that Eric was, the academic, right? That
right.
he's in this system, that he's going up against the institution. I guess all that stuff, it worked for me just because even though there weren't any stakes on like a global scale or frankly even on like a impacting anything in the larger reality of the world scale, like I bought that for an academic in the world of academia, this was a huge deal. And then that it kind of led into all of this international corporate espionage and stuff, and that the idea that maybe the power of this literary figure actually was greater than something that was just inside the academy. I think that's what the stakes for me kind of came in later, where there's this, Straka was actually a threat to people, and they took him out, and they still viewed his legacy in some ways as a threat. I don't know. I thought again it was incredibly vague. But I thought in some ways that was the point, and I liked it. It worked. It worked well enough for me to keep me reading.
That that's awesome.
I
Go
liked
ahead.
watching
Go
the
ahead.
relationship between Jen and Eric develop as well. I thought that was cute and appropriately awkward. Um, so I think maybe it just worked for me because Eric is the sort of the quintessential academic nerd. You know, the insecurities in his social abilities coupled with the maybe overconfidence in his academic abilities and that kind of stuff. He just felt like a very real kind of a character. And then of course you had the college grad whose life is falling apart and she doesn't know what she's doing and all that. Again, I know about 100 of her, right? So I don't know.
Uh,
That's why it all kind of worked for me. I think it was because I bought the characters. I felt like I know those people in real life, and then I allowed myself to get lost in the kind of like spy espionage stuff that was going on in the margins and in the footnotes.
yeah, I didn't. Well, I completely lost what I was going to say. How about that? Um, Straka did it. Okay. No. Um, I totally said in my review that this was definitely something that anyone involved in the world of literature would appreciate. So,
Okay, yeah, sure,
just to know that I was right about that, just kind of gives myself a pat on the back.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
um, so that's a completely subjective reason why I didn't enjoy the book because it wasn't my bag.
It didn't
So
grip you. Yeah,
yeah,
I can totally understand
yeah, and again, that's not hating on
that.
it. That's
Now,
just saying it wasn't my bag. If I would have known, I wouldn't have bought it. Because the thing is, when I first saw the trailer, and like everybody else, I tried to stay away from as much promotional stuff as I could. While looking at the J.J. Abrams interviews and what he had to say about the book and things of that nature. But again, they never exactly shed the genre or the plot or what it was exactly
right,
about.
absolutely, yeah.
And based on the trailer, I was expecting something in the realm of fantasy, maybe a little sci-fi-ish, just something like that.
Okay,
Something, very, very, um, weird, very fantastical.
yeah,
And, when I actually opened the book and things kept going on, I was just like, okay. One of the promotional lines in the trailer is that, there's I think it says there's a fate worse than death.
hmm,
And there's a voiceover saying everything he wrote was true, and there's a guy preparing to sew his lips together, and we'll get into that later
uh
on.
huh,
So I'm thinking, wow, maybe this guy, you know, discovered something that he shouldn't have, and now, there's this kind of fantasy quest thing going on. I was expecting something in the veins of like a Chronicles of Narnia meets S
okay,
sort
yeah,
of
I can
thing,
understand that. Yeah,
where like an author maybe discovered a secret that he shouldn't have, put it in a book, and now, people are trying to take him out, and these two readers are discovering it, sort of thing. But when I realized that's not what I was getting, um, I decided to continue reading, and I said, well, okay, well maybe whatever is here will be just as good, or if not better than what I thought it was.
okay,
And this brings me to the Ship of Theseus.
okay.
I have never read a more wooden book in my life. And when I say wooden, I mean it was very awkwardly paced. I wasn't attached to any of the characters there. I didn't, I couldn't grasp on to any of the characters.
Uh
Or
huh.
actually character, because S is the only character in the Ship of Theseus. And I just couldn't get into what was going on in the Ship of Theseus. And I would like to ask you to maybe expand on the Ship of Theseus as to what you got out of the plot, because I'm still kind of scratching my head over what exactly was going on.
Yeah, so I think at first I really had a lot of the same reaction that you did, where I was like, what is this goofy thing? Having a hard time. You know, it was. S spends most of the book, but especially the first, third of the book, probably so confused. And you have so little access to any kind of information that's going to help orient him and therefore the reader that it makes it really hard to connect with it. Now, again, that didn't super bother me because I had the margin story going on and the footnote stuff going on too. So I
Right.
was like, okay, okay, okay. Um, but I at some point, and I think it may have been the Jen and Eric margin notes that really landed this. But when it became clear that this whole thing was like heavy, heavy allegory for this imagined, what's the word I want? Like this quote unquote real life events that are actually also all fictitious, right? There is no
Right.
Straka in all of this, but the idea that this was allegedly allegory for like his whole real life biography. I started to go, oh, okay, this is really interesting. So then I began trying to read the story behind the story. And when I really started doing that with Ship of Theseus, I was able to forgive a lot of those um, failings of the book. I guess I wouldn't excuse them. I would just say like they quit bothering me as much because now all of a sudden I'm realizing that all this stuff is pointed at something behind it, and that thing that it's pointing to is also sort of being pointed to by the footnotes, and it's also being sort of pointed to by the margin notes. And I found that to be really a lot of, I don't know. I guess I just had fun with it. I started looking at it as more of a puzzle than a narrative that I was trying to like that the narrative that was trying to sweep me up was not only the Ship of Theseus, it was S, and that in some ways I'm not meant to read Ship of Theseus apart from reading S.
Now, you see, there's the issue that I have with this is that
Okay.
I feel like Ship of Theseus was written for the sole purpose of being a part of S and not actually being a legit narrative in and of itself.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And it's one of those things where how can I explain this? Because it's almost like this was made just to be a part of this and not really to be anything in and of its own right. Um, the problem I have with that is that whenever I try to, I'm a writer myself, so
Okay.
I guess this is just me sort of projecting in there, but it
Sure.
bears discussing anyways. That I feel like even if I am writing an allegory for something else, that allegory needs to at least be able to stand in its own right so that when someone reads it, you get, oh, okay, it's a good story. It's a legitimate story. And then you dig deeper and find out, oh, this connects to this. And I felt like the depth wasn't there. I felt like it was more or less being kind of shoehorned in to the Ship of Theseus without it being an organic thing where you find the depth rather than it telling you, hey, this is all allegory. This is not a legit story. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that because Ship of Theseus didn't feel like it was a legit narrative with a beginning, middle, and an end. It felt like it was kind of this jumbled up thing that kind of, you know, that you could get a legit narrative out of it if you if you kind of like read it all together. And
Uh
I
huh.
don't know, maybe that's the wrong complaint to have, but it's like I wish there was like a legitimate story here so I could at least say, oh well, at least the book was good. But then it's like I can't even give it that credit because it wasn't.
So, so here's a question I would have then, and I don't. This is not well thought out, so it may not go anywhere.
No, no,
But
it's cool.
do you have that same demand about maybe like say individual scenes in a larger novel?
Yes, I would have that same demand for at least most of the things that I watch or read because in regards to being a writer, I review television shows and movies, and
Uh
sometimes
huh.
I'll be watching a movie and be like, oh well, that scene was completely pointless. Why was it there? It didn't have any character development. It didn't have any this. And I'm
But
not,
you don't necessarily demand, or maybe you do, that an individual scene ought to be able to stand on its own apart from the larger context of the artistic work.
oh, no, 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 I would never, no, not at all. Not
Okay,
at all.
so my suggestion, and again, not well thought out, just a suggestion, would be that this Ship of Theseus is the same sort of thing, and that I think what Abrams endorsed intended to do was blow up the idea of what counts as a novel, so that Ship of Theseus maybe is only a part of this larger thing, and that, as you've already said, the real story is S, not Ship of Theseus, and so we look at the printed text and say that's the novel, and all of this other stuff is ancillary to this. But the real novel is the printed text, whereas I think they're trying to blow this up and say, no, the real novel is the entire experience of this physical thing that actually can. And what this is probably my favorite thing about this whole work, it cannot exist. This story cannot be told in any other form. It cannot be a film. It cannot be a television show. It cannot be an audiobook. It can't even be read on a Kindle in the same way.
I agree 1,000%.
So I'm wondering if that's like, and again, I don't know, would it be even better if Ship of Theseus was this like, pretty awesome novel freestanding on its own, or would that distract from the thing they're trying to do?
Well, my thing is, I wish they could have done both. But
Sure.
here's my question to you.
Okay, sure.
Would you say that you would be able to read S without Ship of Theseus? Meaning, if no one's ever read Ship of Theseus, if you did not read any of the novel text and just read the margin notes, would you still get the story?
In a severely truncated form.
Okay.
Because I feel like because Ship of Theseus was so heavily allegorical, I really got a lot of Straka's story and his like emotional experience of his life through reading the specifically Ship of Theseus, not the footnotes and not the margin notes.
Okay. So would you deem Ship of Theseus worth discussing as far as a novel in its own right, or is it just to be completely looked at as allegory?
I think any conversation about S is going to necessarily include Ship of Theseus. I think if you were to somehow try to have a book club just about Ship of Theseus, I think it'd be missing the point of what that was trying to do.
Okay, because I had issues with Ship of Theseus as a novel in its own right that I could bring up, but
well, and another thing that's interesting about that is I think that Dorst and Abrams created a fictitious universe where the Academy, the Literary Academy, had those same complaints about Ship of Theseus.
Right.
To the point that some people were saying this isn't even a legitimate Straka work.
Yeah, and
so I thought that was an interesting like meta layer of commentary of them saying like, yeah, this actually there's something wrong with this book.
Yeah, I've appreciated that. I really liked the universe building. And this is my conflicting thing is that I really wanted to enjoy this. I really wanted to. But it didn't grip me, and I had my issues with Ship of Theseus as a novel. But now you're telling me that it's allegory. And I can live with that. I'm okay with that.
I mean, the whole thing about how he's seen all these people sew their mouths together, right? And he's like, why are their mouths sewn together? His mouth isn't sewn together. They're going down to the bottom of the ship, and he has no idea what they're doing down there. And then when they come back up to quote unquote work, they're exhausted. And then it's like later in the book, he actually gets folded into all of that. And it was that whole thing about how Straka was this guy who was on the outside. He didn't really understand. And then when he got brought in, that was when his life was forever changed, and it was kind of this irreversible trajectory. And so you had that whole like, it's almost crude allegory for his experiences. And I think that I don't know, I guess for me, I did feel a lot of the things I think Straka/Dorst writing as Straka wanted me to feel from Ship of Theseus. The confusion, the angst, the sort of helplessness and feeling of diminished size in the face of this like corporate evil giants, the empowerment that came when he was able to like write and actually do things to contribute, the sense of like abandonment and isolation when all of his friends died. Like I don't know, like I got those things, and when I could figure out that these weren't just like a novel, that these were actually this guy communicating his quote unquote real life experiences, that made it work better for me.
That's cool. That's cool. I suppose I mean, I understood the concept of it being allegory with the margin notes and the way they said, this character maybe represents this character or that character, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I understood that, but it's just, I suppose I didn't feel the emotional weight that you did
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
because I was trying to read Ship of Theseus as a novel in its own right before I got to,
So
the
now I
actual
wonder
depth of it.
I wonder if that's because of the different way we approached it. Like I basically would read page by page, margin notes, margin notes. You actually read a whole chapter
Yes.
and then went back through and worked through the margin notes.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that created like some distance where you were basically isolating Ship of Theseus and trying to read it on its own terms. I never, for good or for bad, I never did that. Like
Well, go ahead.
I was just say every experience I had of a text of Ship of Theseus was wrapped up in the footnotes and the margin notes and how those three things were all interacting. I never like isolated the way you did. So I wonder if that affected our reading experiences.
Maybe that's definitely worth discussing because it is a book that you can read it many different ways and get many different things out of it.
Yeah. And to your point, the book doesn't tell you how to read it.
Yes, and
right? It just sort of you just pull it out of the box and go.
Yeah, so that's another thing, and I'm sorry, I really like the structure of like how to go about reading this, and if someone finds something that worked so I read the guy's review on Amazon, and I was like, okay, well, that sounds like it may work for this, so let me do that and see what I get, but I didn't exactly do it how he recommended it, but for the most part, I did. I just kind of went through the timeline of how he said everything was supposed to go. But the thing I noticed in reading S is that they will often reference things that hasn't happened yet in Ship of Theseus. So it's like, maybe on like page 2, they'll say something that happened in page 5, like, oh, well, this connects to this later on. And I'm like, since they're doing that in the book, let me read this chapter as a whole, understand what's going on in this chapter, go back and read the margin notes so everything will be illuminated when they're addressing it in the margin. So I'm not, glancing back and forth, because a lot of the margin notes take place in between paragraphs and sentences and things of that nature. So it's like, let me get a solid grasp of this chapter, go back and read the margin notes with, the sentences. No, it's all good. With the sentences that they're referencing, so I know exactly what's happening here. And I found out that I didn't quite know exactly what was happening. And this is where I feel bad, because it's like maybe I'm not as good of a in-depth person as I thought I was, because I do like going in depth with a lot of things, movies, television shows. I'm good at that, and I really wanted to like kind of tackle this thing as a challenge, and it was just like, wow, this is not good, at least for me.
So at what point as you're reading through it, were you able to suss out the different timelines of Eric and Jen's margin notes?
Well, again, I had the guy from Amazon. So he said,
okay.
The blue and black are the first ones. Like, you read that all the way through. Let me see. I think the green and orange were the final. No, the black on black were the final ones.
The very final, and then there was the purple and black were, I think, the second to last.
Yes.
I think the green and yellow were the second, but they were still pretty late.
No, it's the blue and black, the purple and red, green and orange, and I think the black and black.
Okay.
I think that's how it works.
Okay.
And let me see. Da, 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 da. Okay, so the green and orange were the second.
Okay.
Yeah. So the purple and red were the third. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. Um,
And again, that so as someone who is just reading, not knowing any of that, that it's you obviously the pen color changes, right? So I was like,
mm,
oh, this is fascinating. What's going on here? It's clear, and Dorst did. I mean, that dude deserves some kind of award because it was super clear to me from the very first introduction of these different pen colors that it was a different time, like it was set later in their timeline. I didn't know when, I didn't know how all that worked, but and then of course, then when the purple and the blue or whatever show up, purple and red, it was all just it was very clear, it was very distinct. I never got them mixed up, but it was learning that and letting that unfold, and then of course you had all the artifacts in there that were placed very intentionally in specific places.
yes, yes, and we'll get to those too.
Wow.
Yeah, it's definitely overwhelming when you first get a hold of it. You're not sure how to do it. I took, again, per that guy's Amazon discussion, I took all the ancillary materials out of the book and labeled them as far as which page I got these out of. So I got like sticky notes on all of them. I put them
Oh, nice.
in a plastic bag, and then I kind of go through them with the story.
Yeah.
So that was cool, and I liked the little newspaper insert there. That was interesting, and
Uh-huh.
the
The
long,
letters,
yes, the
yeah,
letters, the
postcards.
postcards, and things of that nature. All of that was just really cool presentation. But again, just I guess when I found out what the story was, it was just like, okay, I really wish I did not pick this up. Um, but yeah, I found that I was enjoying Eric and Jen's relationship more when they weren't talking about Straka. When
Uh-huh.
they were
When they
just
were
kind of finding each other and going through, Eric's beef with his professor and the one chick who they mutually hate.
her
Um,
TA and his former
exactly.
coworker or whatever, yeah.
Ex-girlfriend too.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I found out that I was enjoying the novel more when they were communicating on that level. And then when they got back to Straka, it was like, let's get back to talking about your personal life. Because in that regard, I felt like I was connecting more to these characters in finding out personal information about them, like
Sure.
Jen running away from home, um, and
Yeah,
things
all
going on with
Eric's history,
Eric's.
everything that happened with him,
Exactly, and I found that stuff really fascinating. How these two people were kind of coming together through this book and eventually hooked up into a romantic relationship, and I liked that. I found I was really into the story then. Um, I just got out of it when they started again going through the Straka stuff
yeah.
and all that. And I guess I just didn't quite get why Straka was such a controversial figure, or why what exactly he did that made him so controversial. I mean, aside from being hooked up with all these people, like a socialist, and he was kind of a communist and kind of anti-corporation, kind of this Mario Savio guy, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, okay, that's cool. But at the end of the day, this guy's just a writer. Like, I don't see, there was nothing in there for me to grasp why he would be a threat to these big corporations. And I didn't find that in any of the explanation into his background or his supposed background as to what he did to actually piss those guys off. Did you find any of that?
It worked for me because I think I went into. It became clear to me very early on that this entire experiment is a. I think they even described it this way: a love letter to the book,
Right,
a testimony to the power of literature. Frankly, the old adage, right? The pen is mightier than the sword.
right,
And so, even though you've got the Bouchard industrialist character who has these armies and these power, he's afraid of this lowly writer and his little cadre people around him, and that's what makes Straka so fascinating. And again, actually, this entire drama is basically until with the exception of a few things towards the end, it's almost entirely self-contained inside the world of literary academia. Um, no one
Yeah.
outside of that seems to give a crap. Again, until the end, until much closer to the end. But up until that point, I mean, it really is. It's a book about books for people who love books.
Cool. Cool.
So, I mean, I don't know. That's why it worked for me.
No, that's fair. That's completely awesome. I guess it's just because you look at other writing experiments, things like House of Leaves, which a lot of people are comparing this to. I don't know if you're familiar with House
I'm
of
not
Leaves.
familiar with that. No.
Okay, well, it's kind of in the same vein of this book that's just written in this just really unconventional way and just presented in this really unconventional fashion. It's and I would say that House of Leaves, having not read it but read a lot of things about it and just having kind of looked into it and then things, it seems to be a little bit more accessible than S was. And
Okay.
in terms of just like what the story is, because the story is actually very interesting in House of Leaves. For anybody who hasn't read it, just giving a brief synopsis, it's about this guy who finds this report written on this film. This film is about this family, the Navidson family, I do believe, who moves into a house that finds that the house's geometry is constant geography is constantly changing without the external appearance of the house changing at all. So the house will grow from inside, be like 50 yards of a hallway, and there's the staircase, and the house externally is just very tiny. Um,
Okay.
and that's fascinating to me.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It's this strange kind of thing, and I was like, okay, well that's cool. Um, this again, it's more appropriate for anyone involved in the world of literature to really like, and I think the different the different audiences this appeals to. And I suppose I just wasn't in that audience, which is okay. That's cool. It just wasn't my cup of tea,
It
and
wasn't. Yeah.
yeah, and I can accept that.
And the other thing I have to say, and I've kind of already brushed on this, but I think part of the reason I was just so captivated by this book is, I read a lot, and I have fully made the jump to ebooks. When I have to read print books these days, I get angry. Like, they're so inconvenient. I just love my Kindle so much. I love it. I love it. I love it. And this book, like, it was really, I think what struck me was how wholly this is a physical experience, you know.
Yeah,
And so, like, I was like, what? And again, not in I mean, I was really overwhelmed and sort of in awe of how well it was executed. The need for this to be in the format it was.
yeah, and
You know what I
that's
mean?
yeah, definitely, definitely. That really, again, I give them full credit for everything they've did here. It just full credit, because a lot of this stuff
Sure.
is just like whoa. Which leads me to, I think, just closing down, sort
Sure.
of, um, how much of the ancillary material outside of the stuff in the book did you grasp? Because I know there are blogs out there are websites out
Oh
there.
man, yeah, yeah. Right after I finished it, I kind of played around on the blogs a little bit, saw that people had been cracking all the codes in the footnote. Because even the Jen and Eric don't figure out all the codes, right?
So
And so
there
you're like,
are
okay,
legitimate codes in the footnotes.
oh yeah,
Really?
yes, and you
Are
can go.
Do any of those actually shed light on anything or expand anything?
Yeah. I mean, it's all because it's in the footnotes, right? It's that layer of story about the relationship between Straka and his girlfriend, right? So, because remember, the editing is her talking back to him.
Right. And again, That's another thing. A lot of leaps I feel like were made in this with just the book alone, just the book and all the materials that come with it. I feel like a lot of leaps were made when they suppose that maybe SXC is a woman, and I'm like, where are you getting that from? It doesn't seem like she is or isn't. It just,
Well, and so
seems
yeah,
like
so
she's an
here
editor.
again, I'm coming from the world of academia, right? They made fairly frequent references to, oh well, so and so's theory about this and this and this and that theory about, and because they made up not only a fictional character in VM Straka, but like an entire fictional academy, Straka studies, and the people are getting their PhDs in Straka and all that stuff. They were able to do a lot of exposition by appealing to so and so's theory about whoever won. So Eric was able to say, well, the theories about who this editor is are this, and this, but I think it's a woman. And for me, I was like, yeah, again, in academia, you just see that all the time. You see someone coming out of left field with some harebrained theory, and it almost seems sometimes like the only reason they came up with that theory is because no one else has had that theory yet. There's nothing left fresh to say on the topic, and so that didn't strike me. Again, that didn't bother me so much because I just that felt like a normal part of an academic discussion.
I can dig it.
So
I can dig it.
when he did that, I was like, okay, sure, yeah. Why? I mean, whatever. I don't know why he said that either. I don't know where he got his ideas either. But like that feels like a normal kind of a thing. And he does make all these vague references to all of his research and the things that he's afraid his professor's going to steal and all that. And I was like, okay, fine. I mean, all right,
Right.
man.
Right. So
But I totally agree with you that it was not like laid out. You know what I mean?
yeah, do any of these, and I want to say this like straight away, that I don't expect things to be laid out for me. Like I'm not that person who say, oh well, they didn't explain this and they didn't.
Yeah, no, laid out isn't the right word. Present in the text, right? It's
Yeah,
not like it was like, oh yeah, this is where Eric got his ideas.
yeah. I
That's
would
like,
go ahead.
it's no, I like they're totally not in there, right? He just
Yeah,
like makes these vague appeals to his research.
yeah. I would more or less like it if it was more kind of hinted at
Sure, and it
throughout.
definitely was, and it definitely was not.
Yeah,
I would not at all argue with you about
where it felt more like a mystery. But
that.
do any of the codes actually illuminate as to who Straka is or
No, I
was?
mean, I think you're basically supposed to accept Eric and Jen's conclusion that Straka is not only an amalgam of several of these guys who were all working together, but in the end, it was that guy that allegedly jumped off the bridge and had this relationship with the woman who is the editor, and he went on to, join S. That they speculate about is as much as I got out of
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's okay. That's cool. It just, I don't know. A lot of it was just very, very just. It was just it was intense. It was
it. Yeah.
overwhelming. It was a lot of information, and that's the only way I can describe it as intense. And
So, would you recommend this novel? I mean, I haven't read your review, but do you recommend people read this?
I would recommend it for people in your field.
Okay.
Because I definitely said, as far as like anybody who's just looking for a book to read, looking for something to just read, this is not it. This is not for casual reading at all, and it's gonna take you some time to read it.
Yes, it will.
And a lot of people, unfortunately, we're living in a culture where a lot of people don't like to read. Um,
Yeah, and maybe
so
that's it. I mean, if you love books, I think you owe it to yourself to give this a try.
yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
You may not like it, but if you love books, if you love the act of reading, and especially if you love like literature, you know,
Yeah,
then I think it's at least worth a try. And I would be
yes,
pretty surprised if you weren't like kind of like you, like I mean, I enjoyed the experience. Maybe not everything worked for me, but 3 stars. Like we probably both read books that are way worse than that.
exactly, exactly.
So you probably
But
at the minimum you'll at least tolerate it, but you might be
yeah,
surprised how much you like it.
Yeah, I will say I enjoyed the experience. Like
There you go. Okay, great. Yeah.
this is definitely a reading experience that I think is very unique, very different. I just wish it was executed better than what it was. That's my only complaint about it. And just being, I suppose I can call myself a casual reader. This is definitely something that I just wouldn't have picked up had I known more about it.
Okay.
That being said, have you figured out how to use the decoder wheel?
I did. Yeah. Again,
Really?
the internet figured it out.
Because this is driving me insane.
Yep. Let me go back and find it real quick.
Yeah, you get the book and it comes with this decoder wheel, and I don't know what you're supposed to do with this thing. And it's just in the back of the book, and it doesn't give you kind of any instructions or clues as to how to use this thing or what you're supposed to use it for, any kind of key. And it was just like, what do I do with this? So
It's called an Iatvas wheel.
yes.
Yeah. So, oh wait, there it is.
And I went to the website for this thing too, and did not help at all.
Hang on, I'm almost to it. It's just a really sweet message. It's a final message from the editor. So let's see here. The first reference, Jen says the Iatvas wheel is the key to solving the puzzle in Coriolis. Eric replies she'll have to play around to find the reference to the latitudes. Only latitudes is mentioned. Does that mean there's only a fixed point? Yes. Each code has 5 letters. Blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, they figure it all out. It's a bunch of latitudes and all that. And what it gets... Oh, did they not actually say what it is? Huh. Well, I
They
found it somewhere.
they actually figure it out in the book.
No, on the blog on the internet. I'm trying to find where on the internet they found it out.
Ah, okay.
But it's basically like a last message that's something like, hey, I love you, find me, or something like that.
Ah,
Yeah, I mean, it was, again, when I read it, I was kind of like, I don't want to say I was let down. I was expecting I was expecting like some kind of a contest or big secret or something. But it was a code similar to all of the other codes that Eric and Jen had decoded.
so all the codes in the book were basically just messages between FXC and Straka.
Correct.
Okay, and they weren't plot revealing messages. They were just sort of just messages.
Character building. Yeah, I mean, it was if it illuminated anything, it was more of the relationship between FXC and Straka.
Okay. So all right, because I would really prefer plot expanding messages, or
Nope.
things that would just illuminate other things in the plot. Okay. All right. Well, good TV. So I guess we're both coming at this from a very different perspective, and I'm glad that you were the man to talk to about this because I saw your website. I saw that you really liked books, that you really enjoyed reading books, and I'm said this is the guy I need to talk to because
Well, I appreciate your time. It was a lot of fun. I did love this book, and not a lot of people I know have read it, so it was really nice to discuss it with someone else, get another perspective on it. So.
yes, that's definitely one of the things in there because a lot of the YouTube videos out there aren't so much reviews as they are just kind of unboxing videos and showing you the book, and I'm like, well, what did you think about it?
Which, I mean, doesn't that in and of itself say something, right? That like when people want to talk about this book, they want to like show you the book. You know, I can't tell you how many times someone's been over at my house and I've been like, oh man, they said, hey, what are you reading these days? And I'm like, oh, hang on, I'll be right back. And I don't just tell them about this book. I'm like, look at this, and then they flip through and like, what? And then I'm like pointing. I'm like, this and this and this, and it's yeah, I don't know. It's an incredible experience.
Now, let me ask you a question. Do
Sure.
you think someone else could pull this off? Meaning, if someone else did this in another way, do you think that would be wrong, or do you think that would be
Really? Like,
Do you think this is a new thing? Like the found footage genre of books, if you will?
well, I would say this: if if print publishing wants to survive into probably the next 100 years, it's going to have to be through stuff like this. Um, there's just going to be less and less and less reason to buy print books moving forward.
Mm.
As technology, as all of our devices conflate, if we're all going to have Google Glass of some kind in the future, and I'm just able to, when I'm riding on the subway or waiting for someone, I can just pull up whatever book I'm reading and just scan right there on my glasses. It's going to be really, really hard to convince people, most people. You're always going to have your niche book lovers who are just going to want but they're going to eventually be like antique people, right?
Right.
Like there's still people that like antiques, but you don't have, like, as silly as it sounds, you don't have people making new antiques, right? I mean,
Right.
they're antiques. So most people are happy to go to IKEA and get cheap furniture that breaks after 3 years. So I think if print is going to survive, it's going to have to do stuff like this, where it creates an experience that you really can't get anywhere else. It's not the same as reading on a Kindle. And again, if you have a story that you want to tell and it works fine in an electronic format, great. I read all the time in electronic format, and it's fun. But I think that the form of S enhanced the story for me. Having to use a physical artifact and seeing how carefully and elaborately it was constructed made the whole story and the whole experience much more powerful for me. And so, if Dorse and Abrams, and now this may be where we differ, but if Dorse and Abrams announce they're going to do another collaboration, I'm first in line. I'll be like, oh, it was cool last time, I'm going to get another one,
Cool. I would probably be there too. I would just
okay,
hope
great.
that
Yeah.
I would just want more information about it. I would be more cautious going into that.
Sure.
Than this.
So yeah, I don't know. Like, are we going to see more of these? I hope so. I hope, like, let's be real. The best movies that we have today are way better than the first movies they ever made, because we've improved on the genre. So if this is as bad as it gets, I'm pretty excited. If we can start seeing some, like, truly incredible incarnations of this art form, I'm 100% for that.
Awesome. And that'll be it. That will be it. JR, tell the people where they can find you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've got a couple places. I'm kind of all over the internet. You can go to my blog, jrforasteros.com. I'm on Twitter at jrforasteros. I do a podcast called The Storymen with a couple of my buddies who are writers. You can find that at storymen.us. And that's probably all the best places: Facebook, Twitter, blog, podcast. So
awesome. And you'll be able to find all those links in the description box below. Make sure you check those out if you are a reader. And that will do it for the Strange Show. I'm glad we had this discussion. We covered a lot of good ground, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Hugo. I appreciate you having me on. It was a pleasure.
No problem. Alrighty, so that'll do it for it, guys. I'll see you later. Deuces.